Wheels, brakes, and tires, part 1. First, wheels. What can you make wheels out of? Well, the wheels are the metal part, the tires are the rubber part, and you can make airplane wheels from either steel alloy, magnesium alloy, or aluminum alloy. Steel is the least expensive, but it weighs the most. Aluminum weighs less than steel for the same strength, and magnesium weighs the least. The problem with magnesium is if it gets really hot and you catch the magnesium on fire, burning magnesium fire is a big deal. Firefighters don't really like to have to deal with magnesium fires. So, and it's the most expensive. So it just depends on what your considerations are. Here is what a drawing of an aircraft wheel with a tire. You can see the tire. You can see the tire goes around here, and the tire goes around here, and then the metal wheel, we'll try a different color, we'll try dark blue. The metal wheel is actually in two pieces. This is one piece, and then there's a second piece. These are called split wheels because the wheel actually splits in half, hence the term split. And these two pieces of metal are bolted together all the way around. If you looked at the wheel from this side right here, you'd look around and you'd see several bolts going all the way around, and that's holding the metal together. And of course the tire is going to be on the outside of that. This is not common with cars and motorcycles and bicycles. It's usually a one-piece wheel. On aircraft that have a lot of brakes, a lot of brake discs, this is typically transport category jets, big biz jets, big turboprops, inside of the wheel are going to be a disc pad, lots and lots of brakes. I'll show you some more pictures here shortly. And a lot of heat can get generated if you're trying to decelerate an aircraft that's going really fast and weighs a whole lot. So let's try green. So what you're going to find in these bigger aircraft, not like in a 172, you'll not find them in a 172 or a Seminole, is a fusible plug. This fusible plug is made out of metal, but it melts at a low temperature. If these brakes get really, really hot, let's say you land and the thrust reversers don't work, and you're at a heavy weight, or maybe you're aborting a takeoff and you got to slam on the brakes, and you're going to change all that heat inertia of the aircraft into heat energy, these brakes are going to get hot. As the brakes get hot, it's going to tend to heat up the metal wheel. The metal wheel is going to tend to heat up the compressed gas inside of the tire, and then of course if the gas gets hotter, then if the heat goes up, then the pressure inside the tires is going to go up, and it could overpressurize the tire and blow. And the tire sidewalls are a little weaker than the tread, so tires tend to blow out sideways. And you got to remember, this airplane wheel here, it's just strong enough to withstand normal stresses. It could blow those bolts and the metal wheel could come flying out. I hate that. And so we want to prevent this from occurring. So this fusible plug will melt. If the metal of the wheel starts getting too hot from the brakes, the fusible plug will melt. The fusible plug will melt, and then the gases inside of the tire can leave. Now the tire will go flat. The tire will go flat. That's pretty weird looking, flat tire. But at least it won't blow. The parts of the wheel, the tire won't blow out. The parts of the wheel won't blow out. And so that's much better than things blowing out. Just so you know, the Concorde crashed out of the sky because a tire blew while it was spinning, and the tire parts flew up and hit the undercarriage part of the wing where the fuel tank was and cut a hole in the fuel tank, and it went on from there. So having tires blow essentially it's shrapnel, is not a good thing. If for some reason you have hot brakes, we'll talk about this term hot brakes here before this section is over, you would want to approach the wheel from the front or the back and never approach it from the side, because approaching it from the side is the most likely place you would get hit by this blowing shrapnel. I hate when I get hit by flying shrapnel. Brakes, purpose and function. Why do we have brakes? So we can slow the airplane down. How does it do its job? What's its function? It's an energy conversion device. Oh no, Mr. Johnson, not another energy conversion device. Yes, it is. In this case, it takes kinetic energy. That's the inertia of the aircraft, if you will, or momentum, if you prefer momentum, and changes it into heat energy. That's the purpose of the brakes. So, of course, you got to make it so the parts can handle the heat. Of course, here's a strut coming down, main wheel strut. You can see the brake disc, and you can see a brake pad right here, and you can see a brake pad on the other side, and we're going to squish it together. We'll hold one brake pad still and push the other brake pad up against it with a hydraulic cylinder, a hydraulic actuator to push it together. And of course the brake disc is going to get hot and the brake pads are going to get hot, and that's where the inertia or momentum or kinetic energy of the aircraft goes. It goes into the brake system and the brakes get hot. There are two main components that brakes are made out of. I've already mentioned them. Brake pads, I'll probably call them brake pads the rest of the time, but some people call them brake lining, brake pucks. And here's a picture of several different kinds. Of course, they're going to be made to fit the brake disc. And they work and look a lot of times just like the ones on cars. These brake pads, I know it's in here somewhere. There we go. These brake pads, they're the parts that wear down. That's the parts that you're checking on a pre-flight of the brake system, is you're looking for the thickness of the brake pads. They, of course, have to have really high friction, so they'll be good at turning things into heat energy. And, of course, they have to handle that really high temperature. The disc is usually made out of steel. Steel is less expensive. Here's a disc. And on smaller aircraft, it's made out of steel. And it has pretty decent high resistance. But when steel gets really, really hot, red hot, it doesn't have as much friction as it used to. So that's a thing called brake fade. Brake fade, and you can do this in a car when you're going downhill for a long time and you don't shift it into a lower gear and you just ride the brakes all the way down. The brake disc, the surface of the disc, is going to get hot. As the surface of this disc gets hot, then its friction gets much, much less. And so by the time you get to the bottom of the hill, the brakes don't work very good and you can't stop. So that's the downside to having steel brakes. That, and they weigh more than carbon brakes do. They have, in the last couple of decades, come out with carbon brakes. At first it was carbon pads. Now you can have carbon brake pads and carbon brake discs. The one big disadvantage is they cost a beaucoup. That's French for a lot. They cost a lot of money, many times more than traditional than regular brakes do. But they have some really great advantages. The really great advantages are no brake fade. You can get those things stinking red hot and they still have almost all of their friction level. So they'll still work really, really well even though they're really, really hot. Another advantage is the less maintenance. That is, they don't wear out as fast, so you don't have to take the airplane into the hangar and replace them. And it's not that the replacement costs of regular brakes with regular brake pads and regular steel discs that the costs are that much, but when the airplane's out of service, you're not making any money. So less maintenance equals less downtime. And that's what's really, really important. And then the third one is they weigh less. They weigh a lot less than traditional brakes do. And so if we can shave off, let's say, a Boeing 777, it's got, if you look down on the main landing gear, it's got 6 main landing gear on each truck, and then of course there's one on each side. So we're looking at 12 brake assemblies, and if each brake assembly weighs 100 pounds and you can get rid of 20 pounds, 20 times 12 is 240 pounds. Wow, is 20 times 12? Yeah. You can put an extra person on board the airplane every single time you go, or you can put 240. And that's only if you're saving 20 pounds, and it's a lot more than 20 pounds. So saving weight means you can carry more cargo, more passengers, more fuel. So guess what? Modern transport category jets coming out of the factory, they all got carbon brakes. Okay, let's back up a little bit and go to small aircraft brakes. Little airplanes like a 172, Duchess, something like that. You're talking about, you got to have that hydraulic cylinder, that hydraulic actuator to convert your hydraulic power into force. And here's a picture of one. You can see the tire, and right here you can see the brake disc. Now, this disc doesn't wear out fast enough for pilots to worry about. We can't see the brake pads from here. And here is, gosh, where is this brake line coming from? Comes in here, and here's our actuator is in here. And it's going to push a brake pad, which the brake pad isn't showing up in this picture. And there's another brake pad on the other side with a disc running in the middle, and it's going to push the brake pads into the disc. And there's just this one actuator. You can see this bump right there. There's just one actuator. But here's another small aircraft. Oh wait, here's an actuator, and here's an actuator. So the brake pad, if we could see the brake pad, which we can't, is bigger. And we need to spread the force out, so we got to have a couple of actuators. So the Duchess, or correction, the Piper Seminole, I'm going to guess, it has two actuators on it, on each brake, on each main landing gear, because it's a heavier airplane and you need more braking action. But still, just going to be one disc. And of course, single disc, and the disc is bolted to the wheel, bolted to the with the tire, so the disc rotates and the brake pads don't move. And typically, there's going to be a small reservoir. Now, and it's going to be manually powered. The only power you get is from your feet. You've seen this diagram before. Here's our brake system, and you're going to push down. We're going to have fluid displaced, and then when you release, there's going to be a spring in here pushing the pump piston back up. And that'll just pull the brake back just a little tiny bit. And as long as we have a little tiny gap in here, say 1/16 of an inch, then we're not going to have any friction. And of course, this here is the disc. And just so you know, DISC is also an appropriate spelling for disc. Here's a brake pad. Here's a brake pad. And we got our fluid line. And we've got our pump. And of course, in brakes, they usually call this the master cylinder. And of course, we have a single acting actuator, but you've seen all this before. Now, what you can have is a separate reservoir somewhere else. So as the fluid expands, some of the fluid can go back into the reservoir, or as the fluid contracts or you have a leak, fluid can go from the reservoir back into the pump. And like on the Piper Seminole, this reservoir is up in the nose. But on a lot of single-engine Cessnas, I think all single-engine Cessnas, it looks like this. Here's the co-pilot. We're looking at this from the front, looking back. Pilot, co-pilot, and here's the pilot pedals. And of course, if you push on the top of the pedals, you're pushing down here. The piston is really right in here. And this larger diameter cylinder, that's the reservoir. And so in single-engine Cessnas, they usually put the reservoir right behind. You can actually crawl down, push the seats all the way back and crawl down into the instrument panel. And this is where you would put in extra fluid if you need it. It's kind of a pain, but you don't have to have a bunch of fluid lines running all over the place. And of course, when you push down on the co-pilot side, it also pushes down on the pilot side and makes the brakes work. Boosted brakes, medium size. I'm not going to give you particular weights or anything, but on bigger aircraft, but not transport category jets, big biz jets, big turboprops, we're going to have boosted brakes. Essentially, boosted brakes are exactly like power brakes in cars. If you're driving along in your car and the engine quits, you don't get that extra power for the brakes. They'll still work, but you just have to push on the brakes extra hard. Same thing on boosted brakes in an airplane. If the system fails, you can still push. So for instance, here is a regular set of brakes. But if we had on a medium-sized aircraft with boosted brakes, we're going to have some main hydraulic system. And what we can do is actually have an actuator that helps push down on the main pump. And when you push down on the pedal, there's a selector valve, just like it is in a main system. But the fluid comes down, and when you push down on the pedal, you're doing two things. You're doing two things. One, your power is helping push down the pump to send fluid and pressure to the brakes. But when you push down, it also moves the selector valve, so hydraulic fluid from the main hydraulic system can apply to this actuator, and it helps. So you also have actuator power pushing down on this pump. There is not a transfer of fluid. This hydraulic system here and this hydraulic system here are separate. All you're doing is getting power and helping you push down on the pump, push down on the master cylinder. So if this main system failed, just like in a car with power brakes, your foot power would still be able to operate the brakes. You just have to push a lot harder than normal. Okay, transport category jets, big biz jets, big turboprops. Airplanes, generally speaking, this is about systems that have a dedicated hydraulic system and more than one dedicated hydraulic system, because lots and lots of things on the airplane are using hydraulic power and using it all the time. You're going to find multiple actuators. That is, if we were looking in at the brakes right here, if we looked at it from the side, we'd have to put actuators all the way around, and I'll show you a good picture here shortly, because the brake pad is going to go all the way around and the brake disc is going to go all the way around, so we need actuators all the way around. Lots and lots of discs. Up here we're going to have a pad and then a disc and then a pad and then a disc and a pad and a disc. Multiple discs, multiple brake pads, and it's going to be powered, here's the important part, it's going to be powered by one of the main hydraulic systems on board the aircraft. So here's our main, and when here's our foot pedal. See if I can draw a nice foot here. And when we push the foot pedal down, that's connected to the selector valve, and it just turns the selector valve, we'll say it turns it in this direction, and allows the actuator to push on the brake. So the main hydraulic system is what's actuating the brake. So if you had a main hydraulic actuator failure, then you'd be pretty unhappy. Good news is you could put a check valve in here, and if you needed to, you could put a bottle of compressed air with a valve, and then when you touch down on the ground, if the main hydraulic system didn't work, you could rotate this valve and let these gases go in. So when you pushed on the brakes, it would actually, what they would do is they would route this gases right smack over to here, so that it would bypass this selector valve completely. So you'd have 2 or 3 brake actuations on this, and that's enough to stop the brakes, because one brake actuation, as long as you hold it, that'll keep applying the force and the air in here doesn't leak out. If you're on a transport category jet, you might have nose wheel brakes. It's an option. You can slow down faster. Of course, it adds more weight to the airplane, so somebody's got to decide which is more important, a lighter airplane or better braking. Here's a picture of a transport category jet brake system that's been cut away, and you can see a brake pad, disc, pad, disc, pad, disc, pad, disc, pad, disc. You can also see every one of these bumps right here underneath inside of there is a brake actuator. So these actuators go all the way around. So this one probably has 10 or 12 actuators. You can also see these pins sticking out. Here's a pin sticking out right there. And as the brake pads get thinner, the pin is connected to the pad. So the pad goes in as it gets thinner and thinner and thinner, so you can't see as much of this pin. So when you're doing a pre-flight, since you can't see the thickness of the pads directly, because it's the pads are inside of here, you can't see it because the wheel is in the way. Is that as that pin is sticking out, the brakes aren't too thin, but as the brakes get thinner, then the pin disappears. And here you can see this is a split wheel. Here are all these bolts that are holding the split wheel together. They go all the way around, and you can see a brake disc right here. And I'm gonna move one more. Here we go. I like this shot right here. So here's one piece of here's one half of the wheel, and here's the other half of the wheel. And the bolts are going through here, and it's hard to see, but the bolts are going through there. And then here, pad disc, pad disc, pad disc, pad disc, and this pin is going to go in as the pads get thinner. And of course, this is going to be hot, so somewhere in here we're going to have that fusible plug, because these brakes, man, if they get hot, it's in a confined area, so the heat's not going to dissipate very easily. So having that fusible plug is going to be a good thing. If you have any questions, have any suggestions how to make things better, you know how to get a hold of me. Thanks.